Hello everyone, it's Shannon for Waffle Flower Crafts. Today I'm using the Layering Marble stamp set, as well as these word dies, the Celebrate, Congrats, and Perfect word dies. I'll be also completing my sentiment with these two stamp sets. The first is the Congrats stamp set, and then I'll also be using the Little Mermaid stamp set. I'm using a portion of it, of a sentiment. I'm using the You Are. So these are all the Waffle Flower products I'm going to be using today to make 3 different cards. I'm going to start with a A2, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 panel of white 65-pound cardstock. I'm just popping it in my MISTI here, and then I'll start to pull by pulling off the first layer for each of the 3 groupings of stamps in the layering marble stamp set. I'm positioning them here in the upper half of the panel. This is going to be like a shortcut for stamping a whole panel. Basically, I'll end up stamping it one half and then flipping it over and stamping the other half. So it's a really quick way to stamp the whole panel. So I'm picking those up, that first layer. The first layer is typically stamped in the lightest color. I'm going to follow that rule, that guideline today. I'm going to ink up these first layer stamps with the Waffle Flower Like a Pro die ink. Just going to ink those up here, and then I'll pop this over and I'll stamp it. And I will stamp this a couple times since it's already in my MISTI, just to make sure I've got good coverage and nice solid images. So I'm inking it up again, stamping it, and I'll do it one more time. There's this one little spot though that I'm missing, so I'll really focus on that. Right there is one little spot I was just missing. Somehow I wasn't putting pressure there. So I'll make sure I get that really good this time. Okay, so now, like I said, I'm going to flip that over. I'm doing a little bit of cleaning because I did get a little bit of ink onto my pad. And I'm flipping it over, and I'm now going to stamp the other half of the panel with the first layer. And I do have my panel not directly into the corner, just so that I can have the first layer cover all the way to the edge, so there's no little gap. If I had the panel all the way up to the corner, because if the stamp can't get all the way to the edge, I'd have a slight little gap of white where the stamp didn't meet the edge. So that's why I'm a little slightly off of the 90 degree. I'm not nestled right into that 90-degree corner. And again, I'm stamping these images, again, just like I did before, in Like a Pro die ink, and I'm inking them up a couple times just to make sure I get nice coverage. Okay, so I'm done with the first layer. Now I'm going to move on to the second layer. There are 3 layers in this layering marble stamp set. I'm positioning now the second layer in the negative space that is left behind from the first layer, using my tweezers to kind of help fine-tune things, just eyeing it here, and then I will pick it up, and then I'll do the second grouping. So the second layer for the second grouping of stamps. These are well used. The stamp set has been well used, which is why my stamps are kind of not sticking to the acetate anymore, because I've used it really well. If you have this problem with your clear stamps, all you need to do is just clean them with a little bit of soapy water and then let them air dry, and then they'll be sticky again. So if that happens to some of your well-used clear stamps, that's all you have to do to get them sticky again. So I just got the second layer down. Now I'm going to do the last grouping and the second layer for that. So pulling off the stamp here off the acetate, sticking it down, and then I will position it. I'm just looking for where that stamp fills in those negative spaces. And sorry, was a little off camera here, or off the shot, so I apologize. And then I'll fold my MISTI over and I'll pick up that. So now I have the second layer for those 3 groupings, so I'm going to ink this up. The second layer needs to be a medium shade. So I'm going with a Dewdrop Brilliance. It's called Lightning Black. It's a really nice ink. It's a pigment ink, but it has like a metallic powder or some metallic element in it, and so it has a nice little shimmer to it, which I think works really well because at the end I will incorporate gold into the card. It still reads as like a dark gray, but it has a little bit of shimmer to it, gold shimmer. So I really like it. I think it works really well, these Brilliance inks with the layering marble stamp set, because marble often has like a little shimmer or like a glitter kind of look to it in some of the veins of the marble. Okay, so now I flipped it again, and I will now have to tweak it a little bit, because again, I'm not using that 90-degree corner like I normally like to do, just because I want to make sure I have the layering marble all the way to the very edge of the panel. So all I'm doing right now is kind of adjusting my panel, looking in through the MISTI to my stamps, and making sure that the stamp is lined up with the negative space. So it does take a little bit of tweaking, but I figured it was easier. I found it easier anyways than peeling off the stamp and repositioning it. And now that I've got it all perfectly lined, I'm going to ink this up also in the same Brilliance Lightning Black ink, and then I'll stamp it. And I do ink this up a couple of times just because I already have it on my MISTI anyways, and this just makes sure that I get nice coverage. Even with pigment inks, I do it. So that will complete the second layer. Now I'm going to move on to the third and final layer in this layering marble stamp set. So clean those off. Now I'm going to grab the third layer for each grouping and position it in the tiniest. There's only a small little negative space left in these the stamps are in the image, and that's where this final layer goes. And this is going to be my darkest shade, so I'm actually going to stamp this in black. So just positioning it here, and then I will fold it over and pick it up with my MISTI. And then I have two more stamps to do, because there's 3 groupings in this stamp set. Putting the stamps back, grabbing the next one, and again positioning it into that negative space. And I apologize for my head getting in the way. You really have to, this final layer is just since there's only a small amount of negative space left now, I really have to kind of lean in there and really make sure it's in that negative space. Though again, this is marble is an organic, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Things don't have to be perfectly lined up. It'll still read as marble if things are a little off, which I think is great about this stamp set. You don't have to worry about getting perfect, precise position of your stamps for the layers. So again, I'm inking this up in black. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black. And then I do it twice, just to make sure I have a nice dark and good coverage. And then I'll flip the panel over, and I'll stamp the other side. And I will have to do a tiny bit of positioning. I did nestle it in the corner this time because the stamps didn't hang off. This third and final layer is small. The stamps are smaller, and so I didn't need to, they weren't hanging off they weren't hitting the edge of the MISTI, so I didn't have to worry about that. I could put my paper right into the corner this time. And again, I'm inking these up in the Memento Tuxedo Black. This is my last layer, which is the third layer, and it's the darkest shade. Okay, and that panel is done. So that's a really quick way to get a complete coverage on an A2 panel with the layering marble stamp sets. So there's my completed panel. I also cut a teal and a dark gray 65-pound weight cardstock. I cut them into A2 panels as well. And I also cut 4 more white panels, 65-pound weight cardstock. I took one of the panels, and I'm going to create my color blocking triangle. So this is going to be my template. It's what I'm making right now. So I'd just like to do one across the middle, and then one kind of rating out. So I make 3 triangles in total because I'm using 3 color or pattern papers, I should say, the teal, the gray, and the marble. And I did label it. I have each triangle labeled 1, 2, 3, and I did make a little 90-degree corner in each one of the corners of the rectangle. Then I went ahead and cut that panel using my paper trimmer along those lines that I created. And now I'm going to use that template that I made, and I'm going to use it to trace or transfer these triangle pattern onto each one of the panels. So I'm going to start with the gray here, just holding it in place, making sure that the corners are right in that 90 degree, each corner is matched up, and then I'll use the second one of the second triangles. It doesn't matter which triangles you use, you only really need to use 2. And by tracing those 2, you end up creating your third and final triangle. Just lining it up here, kind of skipped on me a little bit, so I'm just doing it one more time. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to follow that same process for the other panels, the teal one and the layering marble panel as well. So just finishing up the layering marble one. Now I'm going to take these panels now that I have all the triangles traced, I'm going to take them over to my paper trimmer and I will trim them down. So now the panels are all trimmed. I've got the 3 triangles for each color. I'm going to separate them out. I'm going to grab my template again and reconstruct it. I'm going to use that as a guide to help me put my triangles back together. And I'm going to construct 3 mixed panels by grabbing a triangle from each one of the cut panels. So I started with the gray, moved on to one of the teals, and finishing up with a marble. And that is one panel. Move that to a side, and I'll construct 2 more with the remaining triangles. So start with teal, gray, and then completed with a marble. So I really like how this is pretty simple, but you end up with 3 really fun cards just by repeating the process on 3 different colored cardstocks or patterned cardstocks. So I got my 3 panels down now. I'm going to adhere these triangle pieces onto the panel. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive. I found this is my new favorite thing for adhering my panels down or large pieces of cardstock, just because it gives me a little wiggle room to adjust the position, so I don't have to get it on first go. So I really am enjoying this right now. I just apply the glue thinly and disperse it as evenly as I can over the surface, and then when I press it down, I kind of use the broad side of my palm to kind of press and move, and just kind of when I press down, spread that glue around if there's any, that way you don't get any kind of lines or anything from the glue that you can see through your layer of cardstock. Positioning it in here, and then I will press it down, and I'm just matching the corners up. So putting glue on the back side of the triangle and then matching the edges of the panel up with the edges of the triangle. You might have a tiny bit of cardstock hanging off the edge. You shouldn't have any overlapping, but if you have any little bit of cardstock hanging off the edge, or where maybe your white panel underneath is just a tiny bit bigger, you can trim that, which I do. I'll trim these off camera. I'll trim these down just a tiny bit, just to make sure, so you don't really see any white gaps around the edges of the panel. So those are all my panels, and I've glued them all down, and then I went ahead and glued the panels after I've trimmed them down onto A2 top folding card bases. And these card bases are 110 pound white cardstock. Okay, so I went ahead and took the Congrats word die and cut out of gold foil cardstock, the Celebrate. I'm sorry, I said Congrats. I took the Celebrate word die and I cut the gold foil, and I also cut the Celebrate with craft foam, just white craft foam. I'm only showing you the Celebrate here. I did do the same thing with the Perfect word die and the Congrats word die. I cut both of them out of gold foil cardstock as well as craft foam. Now I'm going to glue the foil cardstock down onto the craft foam. I just applied a little bit of liquid adhesive all over the craft foam with a fine nozzle bottle. And now I'm just going to adjust by taking my fingers and going around and kind of pinching the edges of the cardstock and the craft foam together, and that will kind of get everything positioned perfectly so it's all lined up. And that's done. This will give it a little bit of dimension. And I'm really in love with this gold foil right now. I think I have to go like buy a whole pack or something because I'm really having fun with it on my cards. Okay, so now I am going to use that Celebrate to help me position the second part of my sentiment. This is the Congrats stamp set. I'm going to use a sentiment from this set and position it underneath the Celebrate. Just using that Celebrate to kind of help me figure out where exactly I want that second part of the sentiment to go. And then I'm going to pick it up with my MISTI, move the Celebrate die cut out of the way, apply some anti-static powder, and then I will ink it up with, first I'm going to clean it a little bit. This is always good. Just make sure, I don't know about you guys, but I always have a little bit of lint from my baby wipes left on my stamps a lot of the time, so it's always good to kind of clean your stamp before you ink it up. I just inked it up with embossing ink, and then I'm going to stamp it, or I inked it up and stamped it twice just to make sure I got plenty of ink. And then I will use some gold embossing powder. I just transferred my gold into a bin. I've already done it for my white and clear. I don't know why it took me so long to do my gold too, but I just love putting it in my little Tupperware bins. That is a big time saver and it really reduces the mess I make. So now I've applied the gold embossing powder and I'm just going to heat set it. And we are on home stretch here. Heat set that real quick. And now I'm going to grab my, first I'll show you the camera here. So it's all nice, beautiful, and shiny, all heat set. I'm going to grab my word die and use my fine nozzle adhesive bottle, apply some of that liquid adhesive to the back side of the Celebrate, and then I'll stick it down. And I went ahead and stamped the second part of my sentiments and adhered the gold foil to the corresponding craft foam word. I've already done all that, and I went ahead and adhered those onto the other two cards because it's the same process, just different words. And the only thing is I did a landscape kind of card instead of a profile. I did it on the side. That's the only difference I did on the other two cards, and I'll show you those in just a second once I adhere this down. And that card is done. So it's very simple, but I really like the clean and graphic look of it. I just love color blocking. It's one of my favorite design concepts, and I really like the triangle look. So there is the other one. I did perfect, and then UR is from the Little Mermaid stamp set. And this last one is the Congrats stamps. Congrats word die as well as the Congrats stamp set. So 3 different cards, and these are great. This is a great look for masculine cards, which are always so very hard to make sometimes. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. If you want any more info on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and please follow us on Instagram and YouTube for more creative ideas.